you very much for joining us this afternoon for this talk on basically culture, international sales. How do we relate? How do we talk to each other? My name is Jeremy Saylor. I run a business called The Company Connector, which is focused on supporting businesses who want to reach other businesses, whether it's in the UK, where I'm based, or anywhere across the world. My focus is very much on individual specific markets, but always happy to engage and chat with people. So what I'll now do is just introduce Paul. Paul, wait, do you want to kick us off, and then I'll set the scene for the rest of the event. Paul.
Thanks, Jeremy. So good afternoon and welcome everyone. I'm sometimes described as a 47-year veteran of the travel industry, having spent quite a bit of time in senior positions with people like American Express Travel, Virgin Atlantic, the GTMC, which is a business travel trade association, and Southall Travel. And back in April 2019, I started my own business called Red Apple 7, and our purpose is to help accelerate both business and personal.
Oh, sorry. I think
we lost Paul.
We've lost Paul, I think.
He's gone on mute.
He's gone mute. Sorry, Paul, you're muted. I may have been pressing buttons madly in a moment. It's not that I was bored.
Let's get him.
Paul, we need you to unmute.
I don't think he can, because he's only you can.
Okay.
Okay.
I thought I might have been sort of cancelled or no platformed or something. Okay, so very quickly, I'll just say that again. I'm a 47-year veteran of the business travel industry, having worked for American Express Travel, Virgin Atlantic, the GTMC and Southall Travel, and I started my own business consultancy called Red Apple 7 back in April 2019. And with me, I have a number of associates, all using their personal experiences to help their customers.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. Chris.
Yeah. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are, I guess. My name is Chris. I was born in Amsterdam. I'm calling in from Brussels, Belgium at this moment, where I've been living for the last 15 years, more or less. I started my own company in 2007, and my main focus is culture and cultural differences. And through that, I met Paul, and through that, I met Jeff as well. And we did some work together in the Middle East and in the Virgin head office in, was it Massachusetts or New York? Anywhere.
Newark, yeah.
Newark, okay, yeah. Oh, no, okay, yeah. So that's what I do. And again, my specific addition to this webinar or meeting is culture and cultural differences.
Lovely. Thanks, Chris. Jeff.
Good afternoon, everybody. Jeff Downs. I'm the co-founder and managing director of Quantum Sales. We set up the business 30 years ago based on the belief that sales, certainly in the UK, was a much misunderstood and undervalued resource, particularly at top tables in companies. So our mission for the last 30 years is to help do something about that and make sure that professional selling is if you like, a key tool for companies to use to differentiate themselves and to grow. So we would describe ourselves as behavioral change people within selling operations. And we have done that over the last 30 years in corporate, multinational environments, right through to SMEs. That's us.
Good. Well, thanks, Jeff. And this call really came about, and the purpose for this being here today is that we've got, particularly with Paul and Jeff and Chris, all of us really, we've got international sales experience. And we were discussing how to adapt and adjust to cultural differences and the impact of cultures on markets and environments in which we work. And even if you don't follow football, I think you can't help but have noticed that since Sunday, we've seen a case whereby the overseas owners of football clubs have maybe read the music and read the mood wrong in terms of the way they wanted to engage with their market and their audience, and what that's led with the particularly in the UK with the 6 English clubs, all with overseas owners looking to form into a breakaway football league across Europe, and discovering fairly quickly just how unwelcome that was by their market. and their clients and partners and stakeholders. So it really is very, very important to understand the cultural mood of the markets and the places that you want to work in order to be understood. Being British, we have a tremendous understanding of how to work overseas. We arrive, we shout at you until you understand us, and then we leave again, in the meantime complaining because you don't have good food and we can't watch our television. So cultural understanding is very, very important in those contexts. We're here booked for about 90 minutes, but we're not going to stick to it religiously. It's an opportunity today for, we're going to have a quick chat with Paul and Chris and Jeff on a couple of points, and then I'll open the floor. If you've got questions, comments or thoughts that you want to post, then with the numbers we've got, fairly light, which is good, so we can get involvement if we want to, but please post any questions, thoughts or comments in the chat function, and I'll keep an eye on those and I'll draw those to the panel's attention as well. And if you stay to the end, then Chris has got a resource that will be available to all the participants who are with us. It's a Cultural Matters cheat sheet, and we'll share that with you at the end and give you access to that. Also, many of you will have come to this event by registering on the LinkedIn page that we set up a while ago. The ambition is that we'll keep that group open and we'll keep the conversation going in that environment. So we're building a community within LinkedIn on the event page that should stay there, and we can keep talking and sharing resources, asking questions and seeking solutions. If you need the bathroom, you probably know where it is. If the fire alarm goes, then call the ambulance and the fire service. And if you need the bathroom, as I say, please leave the room because we don't want to see that, or at least turn your camera off. So Paul, just to start us off, I mean, obviously a key part of your knowledge and experience, and I think why a lot of people are with us today, is around your time when you were at Virgin Atlantic. Can you maybe just touch on the fact of how you transitioned the work you were doing on sales transformation from the UK to a more global market, and what happened to drive that forward? Paul.
Well, yeah, Jeremy, thank you. So I think I best try to set the scene really and go back to 2000 when Richard Branson actually hired me and asked me to come in to take over the sales team. Because they, if you remember, maybe lots of people may not remember, but at the time Virgin Atlantic was already an iconic brand and a very successful airline. So why would you want to introduce a sales culture and change what you were already doing? Well, the answer to that was that the board were about to embark upon a period of huge investment in product and service, in new routes, in aircraft. A new aircraft, and as a result of which they recognized that they really did need to invest in the sales team, because there was what Richard always said to me is, where you create differentiation, you create profit. And so what we wanted to do was create differentiation in the sales team throughout the market. So it's a key point, I think, in realizing that needed to be done, despite the fact that the business was already very successful. And so I was brought in, if you like, to create that sales culture and to improve the performance of the business in that sense, and also to change behaviors from what traditionally that we've done. So that story, if you like, that transformation story, you can actually listen to, or you can actually watch the video on the Red Apple 7 website. So having sort of achieved what we achieved in the UK and delivered all the critical numbers, and also being recognized as the market as the best airline sales team, not just through what customers were saying, but also through what our competitors were saying, and also due to the fact that we'd won a number of awards. The board decided that it would be a good thing to do now to take this program overseas into all the international markets and achieve the same that we've done in the UK, and repeat the exercise. Now, I knew that based upon our experiences, because this isn't just a training program that we'd implemented. It was because training programs, lots of training programs don't work. Training is part of the overall initiative and the overall goal of what you're trying to do. It's the most important thing to understand is that you're actually changing behaviors, and those behaviors need to be led from, from the top. So when they said to me, take this around the rest of the world, take it to the West, take it to the Far East, take it to Middle East and Africa, etc., then I knew that there was an added piece of complexity here, and it wasn't going to be, easy. So I knew, having worked with Jeff at Quantum for a number of years, I knew I was going to have to bring in another expert as far as the international element was concerned, which is why I approached Chris. Now, I first met Chris at a travel conference a couple of years before, and I was listening to Chris on stage talking about the 4 dimensions of culture, and it just got me thinking. At the time, I had an Italian guy in my management team, and great fella, very good at his job, but I could never get him to do what I really needed to get him to do. And as a team, we'd agree that we were going to do something, and then he'd walk away and just not do anything. So as Chris came off stage, I introduced myself and I said, I think you can help. I think you can help me solve a problem I didn't really know I had, having listened to you. And I explained my challenge, and then Chris just said to me, he's from Northern Italy, isn't he? And I said, how would you know that? And he said, well, because of the way he's acting is typical of the people from that particular region. So from that moment on, I was sold, really. And he gave me some tips as to how to get the best out of this guy. And it worked. It really did work. So when I knew, therefore, that I was going to have to, take this program overseas, I'd called a global sales meeting, the first one of its kind ever at Virgin Atlantic in Dubai, and we were using it to launch the program. So I had Jeff along naturally and invited Chris along, and I said, do me a favor, just observe throughout the day and just be there, and then let me know what you think. So we had a meeting. People loved being there. They loved the fact that they were meeting colleagues that they'd never met before, even though they'd spoken to them. Yeah, we launched the program. We were talking about the business, etc. And at the end of the day, over a short beer, I said to Chris, what do you think? And he just said to me, you've got no chance of making this a success going about it the way, if you're going to go about it like that. And then explained to me that really, Paul, what you can do is, you can get the Brits and the Americans and the South Africans and the Nigerians and the Australians, in the same room. You can probably get the Chinese, the Indians, and the guys from Dubai in the same room when you're going through this program. And whatever you do, get the Japanese on their own and just deal with the Japanese completely separately. So it was on the basis of that over the next number of years, in both the training programs and in the gatherings, we applied that thinking as to how to make sure we've got certain groups of people together to try to accelerate the progress and provide the tools and the change that we needed to do. And we just didn't do that internally. When that then morphed into, we created a multinational sales team, we applied the same thinking for the multinational sales team. And also then when thinking about dealing with, with customers, and we do things like making sure in certain cases, we'd have whoever the most senior person was, irrespective of which market they were from, we'd have them lead. In other situations, we just have the local person lead in some of those presentations or negotiations. So understanding that we needed to learn and to understand and to apply this cultural awareness to our sales program, but also to apply it to actually working with our colleagues and also to the customers, significantly increased our speed and our chances of success in that sense.
That's good. I think I'll come to Chris and Jeff just to elaborate in a moment, but I think one of the things that struck me as we're talking is that, do you think there were other issues being in a company that had such a strong brand of Virgin, because Virgin has that brand, and you've mentioned Richard by name right at the very beginning. We all call him Richard. He doesn't know who I am and all the rest of it, but we call him Richard. He's a bit Madonna, you know, one word. And do you think that was also an issue that needed to be addressed, that where you've got a global company with a very strong, unique kind of brand and style, how that fits within different cultures? Actually, Chris, I might put that one to you. How does that work, where you've got such a strong individual brand in a business that needs to be adjusted and adapted by the cultures that we're looking at?
Well, in a way, it's I think it's important because you have this one denomination which will unite at least to some extent people. On the other hand, if you compare virgin to coffee in general, how people drink coffee pretty much all over the world, but how they have their coffee and when they have their coffee and how much coffee, that will depend on the culture and the cultural background. So they can and they have identified themselves with the Virgin brand as such, but in what way they do and in what way, for instance, their loyalty goes, or how far their loyalty goes to a specific company, for me, depends very much on the culture and the cultural background, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's good. Jeff, your thoughts on kind of a sales process applied to a company that's got a very strong brand and a presence?
Yeah, I mean, there's a real learning curve for Quantum, because although we sort of always tailor our program, if you like, and the process of change to the circumstances and the initial audit that we carry out, the sort of style of how we communicate it, the content to sales management and to frontline salespeople, we tend to have a certain set of steps, and if you like, the pedagogics tend to be set in stone. This is how we do things. And of course, at that point anyway, we were predominantly working in the UK. Our first international trip was actually over to the US. Now, that was fine. It didn't seem, there's the obvious language difficulties with the US to a degree. But, it wasn't too much of a problem. But shortly after, I flew out with Paul to Tokyo, and working with the sales team in Tokyo, and the first morning with a sales workshop that I was running was a complete nightmare, because our style of running those workshops was very deductive, i.e. it was participative, and it was about asking questions and getting feedback from the group, which worked 100% everywhere else we worked. But they were just completely silent. And Paul and I had a chat over lunch. We've got to get some feedback here. What's going on? You may want to come here, Paul. I can't remember exactly how we learned very quickly to change a few things and what the feedback loop was. But I remember that was the first sort of impact of recognizing these cultural differences, which was so important in terms of winning people's hearts and minds and getting them to change their behaviors.
Yeah, if you remember, Jeff, actually, we'd taken with us one of my Japanese sales staff who was based in the UK to sell to the Japanese market. And we took her with us. And when we had that break, I did say to her, I said, "What are we doing wrong?" And she just turned and I said, "The head of sales is in the room. And there's nobody is going to say anything unless the head of sales says something first. The fact you're asking questions and he doesn't know the answers to those questions, he's staying silent because he does not want to lose face. And so that's why you've got complete silence. So once we realized that, then we started to adjust. But they took us out for karaoke that night, and it was completely different, wasn't it, Jeff?
And in addition to Paul and what Jeff are saying as well, and to the audience here present as well, what you see also is that listen to the story of Jeff and Paul. You guys don't know how to deal with that. I mean, you're stuck. They don't know how to deal with you, but you also do not know how to deal with them. Right. So it is a 360-degree thing. I mean, understanding the Japanese is one thing, but you need to understand yourself as well in relationship to that other culture. So it is a 360 thing as well.
I think one of mine was I was actually on a call yesterday. We did an event Bulgarians, and when they first meet you, the Bulgarians call you Mr. Taylor. Call me Mr. Taylor, and after the first couple of people, I kept looking around to see if my dad was in the room, because he's Mr. Taylor, I'm Jeremy. And I think, but that formality, the approach to formality, and the fact of waiting for the leader, as you were saying, Paul, to adopt and to be engaged is quite important. And you can see that, less so, but you can see that in business environments where people are waiting for someone to make a lead, but it's a good lesson there that's important.
Yeah, I'd worked for American Express for 27 years, and I'd worked in many markets, and so in my ignorance, I didn't. I thought that, well, it can't be much different to to when we've gone to Japan or when we've gone to the States and in America. You thought you had that level of understanding, but the work we were doing at Virgin Atlantic was completely different, because it wasn't just about having a meeting. It was actually much more than that. And as was highlighted in that example, and as Chris said, you realize that the onus is on you to adapt in order to make sure that you can almost like earn the respect of the other people, if they're even going to give you a chance of actually wanting to take on board what it is that you're trying to impart, which is that help them be better at their better at their job. But there's almost like there's a whole dance before that you needed to to go through in that particular sense. So it was a fascinating experience, and hence the reason why we needed to turn to Chris on numerous occasions to say, what are we going to do here?
Yeah, in a way, you have to sort of learn to speak into a listening, and everybody listens on a different frequency, a different pitch, if you want. So you need to adjust indeed what you do, and you need to understand how these responses come back as well. Because if you're staring at blank faces, be it Korean or Chinese or be it Japanese, we're confused. I mean, if we're all from the Western world, we don't know how to deal with this indirect communication, because it doesn't mean anything to us. So if I ask Paul, did you go into that party last night? And Paul answers back, there was a lot of traffic. I still know nothing. And so I'm confused. I need that direct, did you go or did you not go? I need a yes or a no, so to speak. And if we don't get that, then for us, it's hard to read. It's difficult.
Yeah. Can I just follow up on that, Jeremy?
Sure, please do.
Second, if I may. In the beginning, when we were first faced with these sort of cultural challenges, as it were, we went into denial a little bit, first of all. And I remember having a conversation with Chris and Paul and saying, look, we're driving a behavioral change program here. And no matter where you are, people will be, or some people will be resistant to that change. Mm-hmm. And they'll find all sorts of excuses not to do stuff. And we actually queried and say, are you sure that actually this is a cultural barrier and a cultural problem? Or is it in fact like all salespeople, many of them don't like changing their habits? And so, we had that debate initially, but it didn't take too long to work out that whilst that may be true to a degree, because all human beings will find the path of least resistance kind of thing, but there really was something in this cultural dimension that we needed to take seriously. And every project that we did from there, both with Virgin and with other international clients, we always took the cultural dimension into account.
That's good. That's good. I'm going to ask in a moment just if we can maybe touch on kind of which are the more difficult cultures to work in and which are the easier. But really just from the audience point of view, if you want to just pop into chat which markets, regions, countries you're looking to reach or you're working in, or if there's any that you've got an issue with at the moment, we can you can message me directly if you want to be discreet. We are confidential. But if there are, let's start talking specifically about places in the world which are more suited. And of course, obviously, I'm taking a Western European English-British approach because that's where I'm coming from. So Chris, you'll probably talk a bit about how within Europe even different countries will find other cultures easier to work with. Mm-hmm. But if there's any thoughts from the audience, I'd welcome those. But Chris, do you want to start us off on that one?
Well, in the 20 years that I've been doing this now and talking to different people and numerous people, really, Indeed, Jeremy, good point that you mentioned from a Western perspective or even an Anglo-Saxon perspective. For me, from what the feedback that I've experienced and my own experience, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. With number one, the most difficult culture for us to deal with will be Japanese. Then it's Chinese. Then it becomes Indian, and then it's sort of the rest of the world, if that makes any sense. Maybe one other note as well, the cultural diversity that you'll find in Europe is, you will not find that anywhere else. And cultural diversity, not social diversity, because you will find social diversity in a country like the United States, for instance, but in general, you can argue that the US is, in terms of culture or cultural trend, is relatively homogeneous, much more so than Europe is as a continent, if that makes any sense. So for us, the Japanese are the most difficult to work with. Japanese, Chinese, Indians, and they're all a challenge, and they're all a different challenge as well.
Yeah.
Good. Jeff, Paul?
Yeah, I would agree, actually. I mean, Jeff, Chris and I have discussed this before, but going through in my mind, that just certainly the Japanese and the Chinese were the most challenging, but at the same time, I think also the most educational. I did a lot of work with India. Did a lot of work with the Indian agents and companies in the UK. So I probably found that a lot easier. You just have to realize that people may think you're getting a yes when actually it's only a maybe. And that was for me the biggest thing to understand, in that sense. And also, just the way that people are regarded, and the way business is done very, very different in India than it is necessarily with the Asian community in the UK. But as far as the rating is concerned, I'd certainly go with that. If you look at Europe and look at some of my experiences both at Virgin and at American Express, I probably found the French, I would say probably the most challenging in that particular sense.
Most arrogant, that's what you want to say, Paul.
No, it wasn't. Well, no, it's
we're just about to lose half our audience.
You explained to me, Chris, because you'd said to me, you explained to me why I was getting this frustration, because in dealing with my colleagues, in France, I'd be, pinging over an email and I wouldn't get something back for 3 days. And the minute they got sent something to me, they'd get it back within, 10 minutes. And you explained to me what's going on is that the person that you're sending it to in Paris is giving it to their boss for their boss to have a look at and give input to, is then giving it to their boss to give input to, then that's coming down. And by the time you get it, you're frustrated, but actually they've gone through their process of decision making. Whereas when you ping your response back in 10 minutes, they're disappointed in you because they don't think that you've therefore gone right the way through the hierarchy, the organizational hierarchy, to give input into this particular, decision. So once I understood that, then it was a question of, I became less frustrated. I just knew how it worked, and I allowed that time and if I needed something urgently, then I'd, pick up the phone.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, understanding hierarchies within cultures as well. That's what's come across from your conversation about Japan and France. It's where you have to reference up and down and understanding where decisions are made. A point's been made with me that if you're talking India as well, you've got differences between the South and the North in the countries as well. And South America, any thoughts on South America? We've got some comments coming in about dealing with South America.
Which country specifically?
There you are. You see, there's the English arrogance. Bless me. Chile, Peru, Colombia.
Chile, Peru, Chile. If I may, Chile would be the most advanced country technologically, socially as well, What else? Peru you mentioned? And
Peru,
what?
Peru and Colombia.
Okay, both are culturally relatively comparable, but the northern countries in South America, that is, whereby they have collectivistic cultures, and in other words, it's quite a stratified society, and usually it is based on color as well, literally on the color of your skin, because they don't hesitate doing that. And it's hierarchical as well. Both the whole of South America is the whole of South America, from Mexico to Punta Arenas in the south is by far more hierarchical, stronger, if you want, in comparison to the UK or to the US. And those are general statements, I know, but it's and within South America, what you see is, for instance, that a country like Chile is less goal oriented than a country like Venezuela or Colombia, where people are tougher. It's a tougher business culture.
Yeah. Okay, good. Jeff, any thoughts, any top tips on your experience in different countries?
Well, I haven't got much to add really in terms of those particular countries, but just to say that it's been a real education and a journey working across Europe, for example, as we have with many clients. And recognizing those differences has been a really interesting journey, and I think in the main successful. Just having that, not knowing what Chris knows, but being generally aware of those differences, and being able to take it on board and make adjustments. And because at the end of the day, we are in the business of winning people's hearts and minds. So if you're dealing with an Italian sales team, you need to recognize those traits, everything from the cultural dimension through to the social dimension as well. So, yeah.
We had a conversation the other day, the four of us, so excuse us for not. And I posed the question about the importance of sales leadership within an organization, particularly where you're trying to put in things globally or in multicultural, multi-country basis. And Chris, you picked me up even on the word, which I think sort of expressed the purpose of this call and this conversation. But how important is sales leadership? But I think actually the question is, how relevant is sales leadership, and is that even the right terminology?
For who is the question, Jeremy?
You can kick us off, Chris.
Okay, well, I did indeed. I read your questions, and I'm looking at them right now. The word leadership is, if I take an example, say between the UK and Scandinavian countries, including the Netherlands, then being a leader is you shouldn't be really a leader. The main job, well, so it's not that you should not be a leader. The main job of a Dutch or Scandinavian manager is to create a pleasant work environment for his people, and not be the shining example of how to do things. Because if you turn out to be the shining example on how good and how to do things, people will actually not like you, and they will think that you've got it up to here, and people will dislike you for that. While in more goal-oriented countries like the UK and the US, it's quite okay to actually show off and say, listen, I'm the guy to do this. I'm the right guy to do this. Why? Because I've got this proven track record. Germany can do that as well, by the way. I'm an expert, and I've got this proven track record. And so it's quite okay. So Paul steps up and say, this is how we're going to do this. And if Paul would do the same thing in Scandinavia, people would say, who do you think you are, Paul? Yeah, I mean, I'm exaggerating, right, in order to make a point here, but the essence makes sense there.
Yeah. Okay.
No, but I think that's true, because it goes back to the earlier point when we were having gone through and started the sales improvement performance and providing them with the relevant tools, and then we started to put that into action, actually getting in front of customers. Exactly what Chris said would come into play. As I mentioned earlier, we need to think about, okay, we're going somewhere here where they will expect the most senior person to stand up and open the meeting. So whoever the most senior person is, you do it. On another occasion, it didn't work like that at all. And what they wanted was to have the person from their local market and whoever was the one that was managing their relationship to be the one that led that presentation and led that meeting. So these were things that, if you're just dealing with UK customers, in many cases, it'd be saying whoever the most senior person was would usually do the opening address. But we applied that level of understanding to each of the customer presentations or meetings that we actually had. So you don't lose the room, or you don't lose their thoughts within the first 5 minutes. It's very relevant.
Jeff, any thoughts?
I think that it's all a bit of a nightmare, really. But when I listen to what Chris is saying, and one of the other questions we're examining is, what leaders should be doing, or what the ingredients of a change process, I think, is one of the ones that's coming up. Our sort of textbook answers, if you like, and our standard frameworks would absolutely clash with some of the things that Chris just said. Yeah. Mm-hmm. This is where it's so interesting, because what is so logical and proven from a Brit point of view is actually the pole opposite in a different culture. And I would say, whatever the context is for you, whether it's that you've got overseas operations whereby you want change to take place in some form or another, some form of transformation, or whether it's you intend to increase your export sales and send delegations and salespeople and managers out to go and sell and meet prospects, I would just say, ignore this stuff at your peril, because it's always going to be hard to implement change anyway, wherever you are. And it's always going to be hard to go and win new customers in foreign markets as well, anyway. But on top of that, you've got this sort of cultural overlay, which, when you look back, would probably help you to explain the business you didn't win, or the change that didn't happen. The real reason why nothing happened. You invested 100 grand in your international sales force and it didn't happen. Why? Yeah. And probably when you go to sort of audit that, if you're not aware of the cultural dimension, all the usual suspects prop up, around, the competition were better than us, or, we weren't quite motivating the guys properly, or our incentive scheme was wrong. And you come up with a whole host of standard sort of Anglo-Saxon style reasons, when in actual fact it's something else completely different from that. That's why I just find it really fascinating. And certainly, I've learned over the years that as soon as there's an international dimension, whether that's us working with a client or advising them, it's for goodness sake, don't ignore this bit.
And on that point, Jeremy,
sorry, Paul, go ahead.
When you're talking about the leadership elements of it, if I take a slightly broader view, perspective on that, I was very fortunate, whereby I had the full backing of the board. They were investing money and wanting this to happen. You could be forgiven for thinking that, the board would just turn around to each of the country managers and say, when Paul arrives in a market, extend all hospitality to them, and he's going to, improve your sales team. And then you think you've got, having that backing, they'll just go and do it. But no, it wasn't like that at all. I still had to convince the country managers. I still had to adapt to the way they were working. I had to convince them and their respective teams in that sense. I didn't go around and sort of say to them, by the way, I've been given your sales targets as well. So you really had to. The really intriguing thing is that you have to be really smart about how you are going to achieve an objective, and you naturally think, sitting in the UK, you naturally think, well, hang on a second, here's a blue case, here's how successful it's been. We've done this, and this, and we've had all these results. Just got to apply it to each of your markets. And if only life was, and clearly isn't, that's that simple. So there was the leadership support and commitment in a number of ways, but not the direction. It's you go and find a way of making this happen, which made the challenge that much more rewarding, you know, in a way, rather than knowing you were going somewhere and somebody was just being told they had to do it. You know?
And it's also, I mean, it seems like if there are only Anglo-Saxons or Brits on the call at this moment, this does not only apply to the UK, for instance. It's not that you guys don't understand this. It's a skill you can learn. I mean, there are numerous examples in terms of other non-Anglo-Saxon or non-British companies that failed miserably in other countries. Think about IKEA in India, because they could not make that work. I think for the primary reason is that, okay, they're more of a social aspect. I mean, the hand labor is relatively cheap in India. So why would I buy a piece of furniture that I have to put together myself? That doesn't give me any status. So why would I do that? And then there's Walmart in Germany, that didn't work. Home Depot in China. And then the last example I have, which is Red Bull. I think everybody knows about that, which I think is an Austrian brand originally. And there you see the US coming back into its own cultural shape, because I think they were sued actually in the US for, what is it, the magnificent amount of 100 million or something, simply because of the claim that people made, like, listen, it doesn't give you wings. I was standing on the edge of that building, and fortunately, just before I jumped, I realized I didn't have any wings. So you're going to pay up for that. And then you see that the litigation culture in the United States pops up again. And so, I mean, people fall back into their own culture pretty much all the time. Typically, when the going gets tough, if it gets tough, and if you're under pressure, cultures tend to fall back into their original, say, default behavior. If that makes any sense.
I think language is a whole subject on its own, and I saw a lovely. Some of you may have seen a road sign that is in English and in Welsh, and the English says something like "Go down here to access something," and the Welsh says, "I'm away from my desk. Please resend your message." Mm-hmm. And it's because someone said, "Can you translate this phrase?" and they got back in Welsh, "I'm away from my desk," but they just assumed that was the translation. So, and the other one, of course, is some of us of an age may remember the Vauxhall car called the Nova, and in fact the Chevy have the Nova, Nova, which in Spanish-speaking countries means "doesn't go."
No.
Which is not a good name for a car. I've just been asked just to pick up particularly in terms of going back to kind of Nordic Netherlands. Just talking about this idea of leadership and how it works. How can that be adjusted? And I was just thinking, a friend of mine who worked for a Norwegian company and found the Scandinavian decision making very pleasant in terms of how people dealt with each other without much decisiveness. So how can we adjust? And also, you know, as you're saying, we're taking cultures that aren't British, Anglo-Saxon, or European. Where would we go for this information? What's the best way to do it?
And I think to that extent, the Dutch are in a way a sort of geographically misplaced Scandinavian country, but because we follow very much the Scandinavian culture is very, very comparable. And what's important for the Scandinavians, and including the Dutch in this case, then, is consensus. Consensus. Everybody has an opinion, even if they do not have an opinion. And if you don't give your opinion, we will invite you to give your opinion. And it's a consensus-driven organization culture as well. So if you step in as either a foreigner or even as a Scandinavian, and you say we're going to do it like this, this, and this, then they will say no, we need to talk about this. I mean, there's this, you might know this guy, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, the football player who was born in Sweden, but he's not liked by the Swedes, but because he has a big mouth, unfortunately, is a good football player. So he's got that, well, against him or working in favor of him, depends a little bit on how you look at that. But his big mouth is something that is certainly not appreciated. So coming in with a big mouth and say we're going to do it like this and this and this is destined to fail. You need to sit down and you need to allow yourself the time. You need to understand that decision making in countries like the Scandinavian countries follows growing insights. So and hence we take a decision now, which next week we can revise into another decision. And if you're not ready for that, then indeed you will walk away typically frustrated, not understanding what's going on. We had a deal. Why do you come back on that one? It's not necessary to. Yes, for us it is necessary, because now we know more information than last week, and hence we can actually make something better. Or make a better decision, better outcome, etc., whichever way you're going.
I'm just drawing it back to kind of where we started off, Paul. We talked about this idea of sales transformation programs. What are the kind of the first steps? What are the key elements? Or Jeff or Chris jump in as well. What are the key elements of any sales transformation program? What would you suggest people start looking at if they want to do this process?
Well, first of all, I think is the awareness that, you know, and at the point I go back to, you know, with Richard, successful business, successful airline, why change anything? But he realized that it needed, you know, an upgrade. You know, they got to a point of success, but they needed to kick on. So I think first and foremost is the awareness. The second is you've really got to have this driven, you know, from the top and committed to from the top, and it's an investment in people, and it delivers a number of benefits. But and for me, the critical element is it's not a training program. You are performing a management of change. You are performing behavioral change, and as such, therefore, you need to make sure that you consider that particular element and how you're going to go about it, and realize that it isn't an easy road, and it's one that all good salespeople need. There needs determination and there needs resilience, but the benefits are there. But it's realizing it's a continual journey. This was something that I was at Virgin Atlantic for 12 years, and the investment, once we started this program in year 2, so for 10 years there was continual budget for improving the performance, you know, of the team and of the individuals, and lots of people who worked, you know, with me in the team at Virgin Atlantic at the time are all doing a whole range of different jobs now, and especially with the demise of the travel industry currently, they've gone into other industries, telecommunications, healthcare, and each and every one of them, and we keep in quite regular touch. I turned around and said, you know what, Paul, I hated that at the time we did it, but it's the best thing that I ever did, and it's the best thing that happened to me, because it's enabled me to kick on with my career, and actually, because you're in a competitive, you know, employment situation, enabled me to compete in a marketplace and use skills which are transferable from one to another. So, but I think I come across lots of businesses who think they're doing fine, whereas turn around saying, you know, could we do better, and how could we do better? And then looking at all the things that, you know, you could, and sometimes you just don't know until you delve into it. At first, when I first went into sales, you know, you just thought all you needed was a 2-week course, you know, and how to do presentations and negotiations, when in fact it's a completely, you know, different science. So I think you need the vision to do it, and I think you need the determination to do it. I think you need to realize that it's not straightforward and easy. There will be bumps along the road, but be committed. And you've got to demonstrate you've got to demonstrate from your head of sales, your GM of sales, or whatever, that you can actually do what they can do. You've got to live and breathe it, you know, with the guys in the front line, not just expect them to do it and manage them on some kind of set of numbers. You've got to demonstrate those behaviors as well.
Jeff, any thoughts on sales transformation?
Yeah, so let me give you what I would say is our sort of classic answer to the 3 key ingredients. And it'd be really good to get feedback from Chris on how it could work, might work, or might not work in various cultural settings. Because our standard answer is, you know, reflecting what Paul was saying, you know, awareness, and then clarity of policy and strategy, and what we call management demand, right? There needs to be something in the organisation from a senior level that says, this is what we're going to do. This is our strategy. This is how we need to do things around here. So that's, if you like, a company level. And then at an individual level, the individual needs to see how that affects them and what their need for change actually is and what the gap is. And what it is that they need to change. They need to see that gap in Technicolor at an individual level. But alongside that, they need the will to close that gap. So the third element is they need to be motivated to close the gap, so that there's a sort of need to change and the will to change. And for me, that's a sort of classic elements of any change or transformation program. That's what needs to be in place.
True.
But so come in, Chris, because based on some of the things you've reinforced today, some of that in terms of how you get there could again use the word, it could be a nightmare actually achieving that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think for most of us here, if we do realize already, if we are going to Japan and want to set up a sales, whatever you want to go there, we realize it'll be different. It's not that far-fetched. We might still be confused and not culturally competent on how to deal with that. On the other hand, Paul, you and I went to the US office as well, where you might think, hang on, UK, US, okay, they're not the same, but they're comparable in terms of culture. But there was quite some resistance there as well. And there what you see happening there, which is, and this is where culture becomes complicated, because even with comparable cultures, I'm not saying identical, but comparable cultures, you will bump into issues. And one of the issues, if I'm not mistaken, Paul, was, okay, this is your idea, UK, don't impose it on us because it's a not invented here syndrome. And as long as we haven't invented it, okay, your accent is cute, but whatever you come and bring is something, no, we just don't take that like it is. At least that was my experience the time that we were in the US, Paul.
Yeah, no, agreed. I'd learned from my days at American Express that if you needed to get things done, then it was to provide my colleagues in New York with an idea that would come back 9 months later repackaged. But it wasn't going to be something that they were going to take necessarily from myself. And that's just understanding in a way the sales process and the decision-making process is part of the culture. It's not an insult. It's just the way things are. And once you have that understanding and that experience, then it just increases your chance of success.
And indeed, the important thing is it's a skill you can learn. This is not like you're being Mozart and you know how to play the piano. That's not what it is. It's a skill that you can learn. It's something that you can understand. And it usually the first step, it leads to you understand the why behind the what. You look at certain things. If I ask you guys to go and dig in the floor right now, you might wonder, like, why? But if I tell you, okay, below that is a pot of gold, most of you will start digging because you understand the why behind the what. You know, and that takes away a lot of frustration if you actually understand that you go to Japan and you might not ask for individual feedback. No, they just don't. It doesn't work like that. A better way to do it in countries like Japan, for instance, is give them an issue. Okay, what issues do you have? Go away in groups and appoint a spokesperson who will speak for the group. Then you avoid this whole loss of face, and they don't have to speak out on their own, and you will still get the results that you want. It's just the problems will be the same, but the way the approach to it will be different.
I think, one of the things that's coming across also is the fact that you can tell people what to do and they might not want to, but you can, if you get them on side, it's about any relationship really. It's encouraging people to do what they believe in. I'm going to start bringing it, but one of the things I wanted just to kind of touch on before we go, and we mentioned this in the briefing, is about the fact that we do have this virtual world. The ability to draw together a group of people from different countries. Prior to COVID, we could do it, but it wasn't really accepted. Zooming was an odd thing that you might do, and now this is our world as we speak. Bearing in mind that this technology has made the world smaller, what would be your kind of takeaways for people to use to explore new markets, and how do you go about making that initial introduction? Because at the moment travel is so difficult, how do we go about breaking down those barriers and reaching people in new markets and new countries? Chris, you want to start?
Oh, yeah, well, say remote working or distant working or teleworking, as it was called 20 years ago, is of course has been sped up, has been accelerated greatly by what's going on currently in the world. For a barrier that you might find, for instance, in countries that have a strong hierarchy, like France and Mexico, where or what's a different corner, Guatemala, for instance, they will eventually allow you to work from home, but you will either be micromanaged because the boss, and it could be from the idea that if I don't see you, you're not working. So I want to see you, prefer to see you. So you have to like pop in every once in a while, or preferably see you. So there will be barriers there as well. Another issue or bump in the road might be social isolation. If your boss tells you from now on you are working from home, you must work from home, it's not even a choice anymore, people tend to end up, or plenty of people end up in social isolations. They can't go anywhere, they can't see their colleagues anymore. And I think one thing that this pandemic has shown us is that we are really, really social animals. We really need social interaction. So that, I mean, I think after the post-corona era period, we will start traveling again, and we do want to see each other. We are, well, social beings, and that is in a social context, that's the case, but also, of course, in a business or sales context. I do want to see, and let me give you another example, if I may. If there's more and more being automated, right? Even coffee machines or the making of coffee, that's nothing new. Nonetheless, if you take a panel and they value or guesstimate, value how good a coffee is, then the machine-made coffee comes out on top. Still, we prefer to buy it from the person. I prefer that Paul makes my coffee. Why? Because I have some sort of social interaction. So that is not going away, even though his coffee might be, well, maybe not as good as the machine does it. So that's, again, these are cultural aspects. Indeed, you have this working from office, working from home, and working from anywhere nowadays. And how far this will be implemented will again depend on the culture as well.
Jeff, top tips for reaching people.
I have to say that if, in terms of using Zoom or whatever Teams for example, sales prospecting, if I've got a good prospect in Birmingham, and it's going to take me, 6 hours of travel to get there and back. If they're a good prospect, I would definitely want to travel to Birmingham. Mm-hmm. I want to have an effective, prospect sales conversation with them. And so that's just within a UK context. I think if we're looking to sell abroad, the idea of selling to somebody abroad, in a prospect situation, when we're meeting people for the first time, we're trying to build that trust and credibility. I would think long and hard about trying to use technology to make that call. Rather than make the investment in meeting face to face. Because I think that those two things, certainly within a sales environment, are the absolute chalk and cheese. The interaction that goes on personally in situ is just so different from electronically. So I think it's a question of being more careful and discerning about the business trips being made and what you're doing and the prioritization of them. But if they're important enough, seek to have the face-to-face meeting. That would be my view. I know Paul probably has some views on that as well.
Yeah, no, I just agree with what you've both said. I think the technology has helped speed up in certain ways the communication and the relationship building. But it's for me, it's an accelerator. It's not a replacement. And I think you'll always, and going back to Chris's point, the cultures will demand the fact that they want to. In some cultures, they want to be a friend. They want to get to know you before they're going to buy from you. Very, very hard for that to happen. From a technology perspective, you've got to wine and dine. You've got to not quite bare your soul, but almost in that sense. And it can take, it can take 2 or 3 years before that can happen. So technology won't replace that. And besides, I've learned an awful lot sitting in in customers' reception sometimes. you get a good insight for what's going on sometimes by just sitting in that reception. So I think as soon as all the restrictions are lifted, it'll be, you know, back to normal, with Zoom and other things just being an added tool for increased communication.
Yeah. Could I add just one point to that, Jeremy?
Yeah, sure.
And there's no value judgments to anybody with regards to anybody on the call, by the way, but you may well know a company or know somebody who fits the bill on this one. I have to say that if the selling and the sales process and people are selling, if it's dysfunctional at the moment, right, that they're doing, there's no point investing in travel face to face if it's dysfunctional. You may as well be dysfunctional on Zoom, right? So, you know, it's absolutely pointless just trying to up your game by doing the face to face visit. If there's some underlying
very good point
going on that are not right. So, you know, if you've got some a significant program to address, you know, start with an audit to work out where your team are against best practice, and then work out all the rest of the stuff underneath that, because you certainly don't want to be investing in this dysfunctional selling by putting people on the M6 or on the next plane to New York.
Which I agree with as well. In general, I think this whole working from home idea has created happier people, because I can do the laundry while I'm talking to you, for instance. So that makes it, and people do that. People get to know each other from different angles as well. On the other hand, from a personal standpoint, my youngest daughter, 17 years old, she recently got a knee operation and she can't go to school. Now there is school going on. Schools are open in Belgium, but she's following it now through Zoom in this case. So that means it's a very functional way of using it like that. So it's indeed, it depends. And I am coaching a Turkish couple on their so-called onboarding, cultural onboarding, whereby he already is here on this side of Europe and his wife is still in Turkey. So, and then it's also a functional way of actually including her in this cultural onboarding as well. But I would prefer to sit in front of him and then, if need be, get her on board as well, but then via Zoom, so to speak. But at this moment we can't, and this is indeed what it is. But I think we'll go back to social contact for sure.
I think we're definitely going to see a hybrid. I think with the other thing I found interesting about Zoom, and this is one. Well, it's not necessarily purely for the boys, but there's very few ties being worn anymore. So if there's a top tip, don't try and sell ties anywhere. Although I was on a call which was entirely Californian, actually pretty much Californian, and the 4 presenters all wore suit and ties, which I found quite bizarre considering their process and principality. Unless there's any other final questions or comments that anyone wants to pop into chat, then I think we'll probably draw it to a close there, gents. I don't know, Jeff, Chris and Paul, if you just want a few closing comments before we finish up. And but obviously, as I said before, you're very welcome to use the LinkedIn group to continue conversations after this event and to keep the talking going. Jeff, close us off, and then I'll go to Chris and then Paul for the last words.
Yeah, I think my closing thoughts on what this is reinforced for me really is, you know, you whatever your strategy is from a sales transformation perspective, be clear about what you're trying to achieve, prioritize it, commit to it, drive it from the top, and then think very carefully about what you need to do to equip sales management and frontline salespeople to achieve what they need to achieve and to be motivated by it. And for goodness sake, don't forget the cultural dimension if that involves people outside of the UK.
True.
Nothing. Chris?
I've got nothing more to add to what Jeff just said, other about the culture thing, that is, other than if you want to connect through LinkedIn, personally connect to LinkedIn to any of us, that makes sense, I guess, as well. And as Jeremy said in the beginning of this call, for those of you sticking around or have stuck around, that little cheat sheet, if I'm not sure if my virtual background allows it. No, it doesn't. Well, never mind. It's a little cheat sheet with scores of countries on these 4 primary cultural dimensions. There are about 110 countries there, so definitely you'll find your business area as well. And of course, I'm thanking you for your presence as well, and Jeremy for facilitating this.
You're welcome. Paul.
Just in many ways, I wish I could go through that experience again, quite frankly, because it was probably one of the toughest and most educational, at the same time, most rewarding periods of my career. And I think having the foresight to make sure I had people such as, Jeff and Chris as external consultants. I used to call them my non-executive board directors in sales. It was absolutely crucial, to helping us make the program the success, that it was. But I would just love to have the opportunity. I wouldn't do an awful lot different. Probably just give myself a bit more lead time. But I encourage anybody and everybody that's maybe involved in trying to think about this. And if you need to discuss any particular elements, then you know how to get hold of us, and we're happy to follow up with you.
Excellent, great. Well, thank you all very much. Thanks for coming along today. I'm just putting some links into the chat as well. The cheat sheet is in there as a PDF. So if you want to take a few minutes just to download that and keep that locally, you're very welcome to. And what we'll do is we're going to put a link to it on the in the LinkedIn group, but it'll only be there until Monday, so strike now while you can. There's a link to Paul's website, Red Apple 7. The four of us work collaboratively with Paul, but also our LinkedIn profiles are in the chat as well. Once again, many thanks for coming along today, and I hope that's been useful to you. And what we'll probably look at doing, had some commentary, just wondering if we can have a bit more of a discussion with the audience. So I think we'll take this away and have a chat, and maybe we'll set up a bit more of a smaller group and a roundtable discussion just to take some of the things forward. So that's all from me. Thanks very much for you joining in.
Thank you, everyone.
That's all right, and we'll see you all again soon. Stay safe and well, and good luck with your vaccination program wherever you are.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Ciao.